Thank you, Mr. Chair. You'll notice that the chairperson of the Select Committee, who has just resumed his seat, nor the Minister himself actually gave any sense of how many affordable homes would be built off the back of this legislation. And why is that? Because they have absolutely no idea. And one reason for that, Mr. Speaker, is because there's actually no requirement that any affordable homes be built as a consequence of this piece of legislation. And I am happy, later on in my speech, in fact, I will read the bill to the Minister because he seems to have forgotten that he left those provisions out. Now, the chair of the Select Committee said that the case has been made for this bill. Now, look, there is no question, Mr. Speaker, the case has been made for action. No question whatsoever. We have dipped in Auckland alone in home ownership to 60%, a new low for New Zealand, a record, if you will. There is a 30% increase in house prices since that government took office, and Auckland right now needs 30,000 new homes in order to plug the housing supply issue. Now, that government claims that it has a large suite of options available to try and improve the situation. And what are they? Well, they're going to let first home buyers draw down a little more of KiwiSaver, but oh, by the way, the threshold for how much you need for a loan has gone up at the same time, so that pretty much nullifies any advantage from that. Welcome home loans. I'd like to see some of the numbers around welcome home loans and whether they're making a dent in this massive issue. And then we have this. Now, Mr. Speaker, let's absolutely acknowledge that supply is an issue. There is no doubt in Auckland that supply is an issue. But this bill but it does matter what kind of supply. It does matter what kind of supply, because the Minister will be able to tell me how many affordable homes have been built in, say, the last year. What percentage of homes being built are affordable? Well, if he doesn't give the answer, I can tell him 5%. 5% of new builds are affordable. So how will this bill change the proportion of houses that are being built that will be affordable? Well, it simply doesn't. It assumes that the only problem is land supply and planning regs, and it's part of the issue. It is part of the issue. And we've never questioned that that is part of the issue, but nor have we ever suggested that it represents the biggest part of the problem. Now, let's get down into the nitty-gritty of the content of the bill, because Nick Smith seems so convinced that this bill stipulates that everyone who builds in a special housing area must build an affordable house. First, though, before we have a special housing area, the government must negotiate with the council a housing accord. And it says in the bill at Clause 11, Part 2, a housing accord may provide for the Minister and the Territorial Authority to work together across a range of housing issues, according to the issues that they may identify as relevant to improving housing supply and affordability. May. No requirement. Absolutely no requirement. And Mr. Speaker, we need to keep in mind that's just for the accord. So that's just to establish the grounds on which a council and a minister may say, in future, we might create a special housing area. But in reality, it's functionally the way that the special housing area is set up that really matters, because that is the thing that determines specifically where houses are going to be built and where they will have the special consenting process apply. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty of what is included in a special housing area and what a qualifying development is. The bill clearly sets out in Clause 14 that a qualifying development, predominantly residential, mostly it has to be no more than 6 stories, contains no fewer than a prescribed number of dwellings to be built, again predominantly residential, blah, 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 nothing about affordability. A qualifying development does not have to be affordable. Now, the Minister knows that this is in fact true, because I asked him at Select Committee, Minister, why have you not required that a qualifying residential development has to be an affordable development? His response, Mr. Speaker, was that he didn't want to be too prescriptive, because, of course, someone who goes and builds a new house that might be worth, say, $700,000 might be vacating a house that might be worth, say, $300,000. So why would we want to prescribe that the new building has to be affordable, because at least they might leave an affordable house behind them? Trickle-down housing. Trickle-down housing is what the Minister has presented to us, Mr. Speaker. It is an absolute farce for him to now claim that he required affordable housing, because he admitted in Select Committee that he hasn't. And he even tried to give us a rationale for why he had done this. Mr. Speaker, secondly, this bill assumes that the council is the barrier to housing, to this particular set of issues that this bill addressed. Even the chair of the Select Committee, Mr. Speaker, claimed that the council were all gung-ho and on board with this bill because of what it allows them to do. Let's be frank, Mr. Speaker. The Mayor, of course, wants to try and speed up housing development. That's what he tried to do in his unitary plan. But when he presented to the government his intention around housing development, Mr. Speaker, he said, in order for me to progress what I need to do now for housing, I need legal weight of my unitary plan from notification. And what did that government say? No way. No way. But suddenly Nick Smith then sat back and thought to himself, Mr. Speaker, it's election year and I've got a housing issue. I'll go back to the council and tell them that on my own terms, I'll let them do what they want to do anyway, but I'll do it whilst being able to veto all of their rights if they don't do it in the way I want to. It is a complete fallacy for the chair of the Select Committee to claim that the council are all on board because this is a great new idea. It's the only way they could do what they wanted to do in their own unitary plan. If that government was serious, Mr. Speaker, it would have listened to council when it first said, give us legal weight, because that is what they initially asked them for. This was just about trying to negotiate an election sweetener so that the government could look good at the end of it, and it is absolutely appalling.
Order. The phrase "tell the truth" is out of order and unparliamentary. We won't have that for the further of this debate. Jacinda Ardern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But the fact that in doing so they had to build in override provisions which erode the ability, once more, and I say further erode because that seems to be a mantra of this particular minister, further erodes the ability of council to govern in the best interests of their citizens. And of course they want housing. Of course they want housing, and they have tried to achieve that on their own terms. Mr. Speaker, but it's not just council it rides roughshod over. It's also riding roughshod over existing law like the Waitakere Ranges heritage area. Now, we had the advocates from the Waitakere Ranges come and say they fought long and hard to get special legislation to protect the area of the Waitakere Ranges and to make sure that their legislation takes primacy over any other legislation to protect those ranges. This bill dilutes that. Now, they'll only have that legislation, the Waitakere Ranges heritage area will only have to be given due regard. They could have strengthened that, Mr. Speaker, and they didn't. Mr. Speaker, we've always said we need a complete solution, but we've never just said it, we've also demonstrated what we would do. Part of the problem at the moment is scale in the building industry. We know it's scale, and the Minister knows we don't have enough housing developments of the scale we require. Labor has said we will build 100,000 houses. We know it is possible, and we already have talked with the building industry in order to develop it. The second issue is a lack of competition in building materials, and you even need to compare with Australia to know that that's the case. And again, our Kiwi Build program will address that. We know that tax treatment encourages speculative investment, and the capital gains tax that Labor will introduce will resolve that. We know that overseas buyers is also reducing supply and leading to greater speculative activity, so we will address that. We know quality matters, and that's why we have a Healthy Homes Guarantee. And, Mr. Speaker, we will work with council to deliver housing in the areas we need it most. Labor does not believe in tinkering in this area. We believe in step change, and that's exactly what a Labor government will do.
Good speech. Very good. Holly Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm pleased to stand once again in opposition to the Housing Accords and Special Housing Areas Bill. The Green Party and the Mana Party, in fact, were the only